Welcome to the latest episode of Food Tech Stories. I'm your host, food tech marketing expert Megan Thomas. Food Tech Stories features the leaders pioneering new approaches to technology, collaboration, and storytelling in the food tech and ag tech space. Food and agricultural changing, and fresh ideas and leadership are needed to sustainably feed the growing global population. Join us every other week as we talk to a founder, operator, or visionary in food and agriculture. Today, our guest is Ericca Dennehy, Senior Vice President, Account Management at market research firm Acupoll Precision Research, Inc., a firm that has tested more than 55,000 concepts, ads, packages, and other research stimuli across 35 countries. Ericca will share her perspective on how consumer attitudes and behaviors around food choices are changing based on her experiences leading client research projects over the last 26 years. We also dive more deeply into Acupoll's recent Understanding the FoodTech Food Consumer study conducted with Ladder 17 in order to unlock what motivates American consumers to seek out and try new food tech foods. Ericca holds a BA from The Ohio State University, and I understand, Ericca, that you met your husband through market research. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it was 1992, so it feels like a very, very long time ago. I took a part-time job at a market research company doing telephone interviewing. He already worked there, and when it all started, we didn't like each other a whole lot, but found some common ground and spent a lot of time together working on a lot of fun projects. And as it grew, leadership positions, and then when we moved back to Cincinnati and I came to work at Acupoll, he actually got out of the business and now sells lumber. So totally the thing.
Wow.
Yeah, match made in marketing.
My favorite kind. That's fantastic. I want to narrow in a bit now on food. And I know you've worked in a variety of different food categories. So what types of product features and benefits are important to consumers when they're making food choices today?
It's all over the place. We can often ask consumers about a lot of different attributes and how much they drive their decision making in the category. But one thing that we haven't seen change is taste is king. Clean ingredients are important, and environmental concerns, and are products fair trade and sustainable, and absence of negative claims like, no preservatives, no artificials. Functional benefits, I think, or hinting at least at functional benefits have become more important. But we almost always see that taste rides above everything else. Then they're kind of duking it out for what are the most important secondary benefits.
Interesting. And of course, taste itself can be pulled apart to mean so many different things as well. Have you seen any shifts in general taste preferences?
Over the years, there have definitely been some trends where you see we may be still a little bit in the midst of sour is kind of a trend. Spicy is very polarizing. You test 5 or 6 varieties, and the spicy one is always in the middle because you've got people go, oh, it's not going to be spicy enough, or it's going to be too hot. And then the spice lovers really love it. I think we see some of those things. I don't know that I can put my finger on big trends, but one of the funny things that we have seen that people have learned what clean means. I can look back to the first time we asked people what they thought it meant to have a clean ingredient label, and the propensity of the open ends were the store hasn't let it get dirty and it looks clean and pristine in the shell. And now they get that it's really the ingredients on the label.
I love that. I love that. It's also a good reminder when we're talking about flavor and the idea of spicy is that not all consumers are the same, and that consumers like different things. And so understanding how to segment consumers and how to create innovative products that meet different requirements is paramount, right?
Right. Or how to think about your lineup to have something that's go kind of from easily approachable to a little bit more out there, and whether that's with spice, with unusual ingredients or new flavor profiles or international, it can be trying to build a lineup that has a little bit of something for everybody.
Yes. Any other general insights you'd like to share about food in particular?
Be careful, because if you play fast and loose with, well, why doesn't my frozen meal really look like that?
Right.
But in a concept, a bad food visual can tank a perfectly good idea.
We eat with our eyes, right? The old adage is true. And even so in consumer research. So let's focus in on the Understanding the FoodTech Consumer study, FoodTech Food Consumer, that you recently conducted in partnership with Ladder 17. And this is an area that has received a lot of investor attention and has been popular in certain circles, but we haven't really had a lot of products cross the finish line and come into the market. There's a rather short list of brands that have really gotten traction in this area too. I think it's interesting though to think about what do consumers think about these types of foods. So foods like products made with CRISPR technology or precision fermentation or grown in a vertical farm or cultivated meat that's slaughter-free. And so really interested to dig in with you on some of the insights that were gleaned from this study. First off, what insights from the study did you find most interesting?
For me, one of the most interesting things that I saw was how many people are in the middle. Like I didn't expect to see 60 or 70% of consumers saying, yeah, bring it on, because I think a lot of people don't quite understand what it means yet. I was surprised there wasn't more resistance. Like you've got about 40% of people who were saying, sure, I'll try it. I'm into it. I'm open. And then another 40% sitting in the center, and they're up for grabs. How these food companies talk to them and come to them with messaging will be very, very important because they could go either way. The other piece is everybody thinks food is different, and it's really not. It's still a product, and people buy benefits. They don't buy features. Benefits are different in food where taste is the leader, but there's also new flavors, new formats, new textures, new combinations. And then you get into some of these benefits that are a little more related to, improved physical or mental performance and all these functional benefits that underpin great taste. Sometimes as marketers, that's a good reminder, even though you have cool features and the way that you're made might be really fun and different and potentially polarizing, focusing on connecting them to an end benefit helps the consumer understand what's in it for them.
I think that's exactly right. And I know from my experience working in the food tech area specifically is that there is sometimes that desire to talk a lot about the technology. But I know that the research that we had conducted showed that the more you talked about the technology, consumers do want basic information. They want to be aware of it and they want to have resources. But the more you talk about it, we consistently saw that taste appeal went down, right? They thought it wasn't going to taste good. So I think it is that striking that delicate balance between providing information that people need about those benefits so they can make an informed purchase decision while still, to your point, positioning the product in a way that makes it look appealing and enjoyable to eat.
And trying to not go so far with all the technology communication to have it feel like fake food.
Exactly. Yes, that's a fascinating concept because, of course, things change, right? And innovation is part of society, right? It's part of how we live. So how to do that in a way that's effective and brings consumers along with you that's really the secret, I think, to the game. What differences, if any, did you see between younger adults and older adults? I know we hear a lot about differences and perspectives and behaviors across generations, but any insight that you can share about that?
I think younger consumers are just more motivated by technology in general in a number of categories and less scared of technology, or I guess skeptical might be a better word. I also think there's a higher prevalence of younger consumers that are looking for plant-based food options, which tend to be more represented in some of these food tech foods right now. They're more open also to messaging around, even if they're tertiary, the environmental and sustainability benefits that go along with a lot of this. I do wonder, though, if there's an opportunity to continue to really think about older consumers, and I hate to say older consumers because I fall in those age brands now.
As do I.
But thinking about like these kind of health-related benefits, are there preventative or reactive or anti-aging benefits that could really be beneficial to the population as it's aging?
That's really interesting. I think that sounds exactly right. Kind of taking that wellness perspective and applying it, right? And thinking about product positioning is really, I think that's very insightful. I can't wait to see how members of Gen Z and millennials will continue to impact the food choices that we have, because I think they're going to really drive a lot of impact.
If they're shopping for their own families, one of the important things may be as some of these food tech companies are able to gain some critical mass, we'll also be seeing the price of some of these products be able to come down a little bit as demand and grows and manufacturing becomes a little bit easier, because I think that's probably a barrier for some people too, to be able to, even if they're interested, to think about, can I really afford to pay more for this different type of food?
And I would imagine that goes back to benefits, right? And if there aren't clearly articulated benefits as to why, consumers are savvy, right? They'll save that money, right? And make a different choice. It's all about that value proposition. Looking in at a macro level again around technology and food, are you noticing any larger changes in consumers' perceptions or reported behaviors? And if so, could you break down those changes?
I do think we've seen some shifts in the preference for organic is one thing. And in earlier days, we saw a lot of trade-offs consumers seemed to be making to say, you'd see the lists that were, here are the top 10 fruits that are most important to buy organic. And as organic is, and I'd almost lump limited ingredient together with that. I know it's not the same thing, but to have these simpler, easier to understand, cleaner label, like I said earlier, organic products are proliferating kind of out of the produce, out of the perimeter and into the center of the store. That's got to be driven by consumer acceptance for them and willingness to pay a little bit more for them to avoid chemicals, pesticides, and hormones.
Are you still seeing in the research you're doing for different clients interest in organic foods? Is that still a key driver?
It's not everybody, but I think the segment of consumers for whom that is an important benefit has grown larger. There are lots of other free-froms. So whether it's dairy-free, gluten-free, maybe to a lesser extent kosher, it's a little bit of a different decision-making criteria there, but things that are becoming extremely important to small groups of people. It's so important and so critically important for people with allergy issues in particular to be able to avoid it. It is driving choice for them, but it becomes important for the brand or the manufacturer to understand, where's the most important place to put this? Like, do I use my prime real estate on the front of the package for something that only 25 to 30% of consumers really care heavily about? Or do I put it somewhere else because the people who care most will go looking for it? I think depending on the category, people are making different choices there. If there's lots of, gluten-free options in a particular category, maybe it becomes less important to have it right there on the front. Whereas if you're kind of a breakthrough gluten-free product in a category, you want to wave that flag a little.
Yeah, if it's a source of differentiation, right? It's something to tout. And I do know sometimes there can be a desire to put everything right on the front, right? And let's tell all the things, right? And just how important it is for brand marketers to think about what are those really top things that will be most motivating and or differentiating, but within the category, right? Like to your point, within the competitive set, do we need to call attention to something because there's certain dynamics we need to be dealing with? Yeah, I think that's a great call. There isn't one single one-size-fits-all solution there. So how would you counsel brand leaders when they're thinking about communicating, positioning, developing marketing strategies for food tech foods? Any kind of key takeaways from this study or other work that you've done that you'd like to bring up?
Yeah, I think it really is benefits and the focus on benefits. To go back to what we've kind of touched on in some other questions, consumers want to know why a product is for them. But there's also a smaller but very passionate portion of the population that's really driven by brand purpose too. That is a particular area for these food tech companies to think about, because why are you doing what you're doing? These companies can feel more confident about kind of leveraging what they're passionate about, what's driving them to be creators in this new world of food and agriculture, but connected to a higher order benefit. So what is it? Is it really positive environmental impact? Is it, alleviating food scarcity? Is it protecting crops from drought and pests? Is it giving people with life-threatening allergies a safe way to have the same experiences that other adults, and especially kids, get to have? You can talk about the real benefits of the product, but then turning these reasons for being into higher order benefits can really connect with consumers.
And is that something that's always been there in your experience, or is there something new about that?
I think it's probably always been there, but I think brands are focusing on it a whole lot more. I'm trying to think of some examples from when we were younger. I do think there have always been some brands that have led with their heart Hallmark is an easy example. There's always been the Hallmark tearjerker, but shoes that donate a pair of shoes to the homeless every time.
Toms.
Yeah. So I think there's always been some of it, but I think it has become more important for companies and brands to put their money where their mouth is a little bit and speak to why they do what they do.
Well, one of the brands from back in the day I think of is Newman's Own, right? That had that charitable profits donated to charity was built into their go-to-market approach. That's interesting for sure. And I think an important insight. Do you think from this study or others, are consumers becoming more aware of the impacts of climate change in particular? Or is that still something that isn't really top of mind for folks?
I think that's one topic. You have a subset of consumers who are really passionate about it and they believe in it very strongly. And you have a group of consumers who are still thinking, okay, I think maybe this is a little overblown, and finding like the right way to talk about it that kind of doesn't over dramatize it either way. It's kind of like an all-in energy policy where you think, is it realistic to think that by 3 years from now, we're going to be all electric? Well, maybe not. But is there a pathway to get there that uses smarter fossil fuels and better created things and renewable resources and focuses on how you get there to make small change easier for most people to make, to have a better impact, on everybody globally? I think you do the same thing with food. I don't know that you tell everybody you just can't eat meat anymore. But if you are going to eat meat, let's have sustainably raised, humanely farmed. Let's do things the right way so that it's good for you and good for your neighbor and good for the planet, even if you don't have exactly the same preferences today.
I find that that's increasingly becoming table stakes, right? As to thinking through, is it good for my neighbor, potentially good for the planet? Obviously, to your point earlier, taste is still king. Obviously, price is still important. It's interesting that these newer areas are increasing their share of mind and how consumers are making their purchase decisions. Looking to the future of new food products, what are you most excited about?
You mean like me personally?
Yeah. Or from the research you've done and maybe some emerging areas that you're like, I'm really interested where that's going to go, or there's opportunity here.
I think some of the most exciting opportunities is thinking about what you can do with taste and flavor and combining things, and whether it's better, bolder flavors overall, or taking from column A and column B to come up with a completely different flavor. I think a bad example is the cotton candy grape, because I think they're way too sweet, but that kind of thing where you're going for, this is a whole new taste sensation and it's fun, and they're food that's fun to try. I think more seriously, I go back to what we started to talk about earlier with wellness and thinking about the opportunities we have for ourselves, for the consumers that my industry and yours both serve, to think about how do you manage your health with your food versus so much medication and so much reactivity versus can you eat your way healthier? I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
I know that there is a movement, that food is medicine movement, but I am not certain from what I understand that consumers understand much about that. Because to me, I think about, well, food is food, right? But healthy eating can be part of a healthy lifestyle and can improve your overall health. I know one of the interesting insights in terms of categories, in terms of food tech foods and what categories consumer were looking for more options from was beverages. I know there's been a lot of activity in beverages in general, and that certain subcategories within beverage have really grown in recent years. Any thoughts on food tech in beverages? I don't think there have been many products in that category that I would classify as food tech.
That one doesn't spark anything immediately for me unless there's some kind of synthesis between dairy milk and plant-based milk, milk with a Y. They're a way to do the same thing that's being done in cultivated meats with milk, that you can get really the experience that, whether it's goat's milk or cow milk or what have you, that people want from it, easier, more stable way. I think another place that I saw is produce, some excitement around new opportunities in produce. And I imagine that's both partly by kind of flavor and availability, maybe at different times of the year. But some of the things we've talked about before, having fruit that really tastes like fruit, and things that maybe help with the value equation by not spoiling as fast or not degrading.
Maintaining like that great mouthfeel, right? So still like a nice texture, fresh, juicy. And yeah, we've also talked in produce as well about how few of the new products that go into a grocery store in any given year are in the produce category, right? We haven't seen that level of innovation and there's some very real reasons for that. It's complex to develop new types of products, breed new types of products. And then, of course, the cold chain that gets it to market is complex as well. But yeah, really, really interesting. Definitely a lot of opportunity for, I think, forward-thinking companies to be looking into food tech and seeing how they can develop products that really check all those boxes for consumers, knowing that there is that 40%-ish group who is ready and another 40% who's thinking about it. So It's really could speak to opportunity. Any final thoughts before we wrap up? Any additional insights around food or food tech products and consumer research that you'd like to impart to our listeners?
Well, if we get back to this idea of, we were talking about packaging and what goes on the package. In so many small companies, the package is your advertising. And we'll often take a step of kind of going back to where we started at the very beginning, like staying true to the insight, take a step of testing just a package front as a concept to see when we gave people this copy and this setup and your insight, your benefit, and you told them the story and they really loved the product. When you put the package with the graphics that are likely to go to market on the shelf, are consumers as passionate about it? Do they still want to pick it up and buy it? We kind of internally talk about that as mind the gap. Make sure that that insight stays true and that the consumer sees everything she needs to see to make a purchase decision.
And why do you think that gap grows? Like what drives that typically in your experience?
Going from the concept to the product, several things. Sometimes it's as simple as the brand manager left and somebody new came in and picked it up and they didn't have the same heart for it. Sometimes you go to R&D and say, okay, we've got this idea and here's what we want to do. And they go, oh, that can't be a foam. It has to be a syrup. Or it can't be a foam unless you want it to cost more. So there are things that just happen during the development process that all of a sudden you go, wow, this was an amazing idea. And you go, that kind of resembles the idea we tested. And that's the difference. Calling it the same thing doesn't make it the same thing.
Absolutely. And certainly that's something that resonates for me, having been in that situation myself. But new product development is that series of trade-offs, right? And you're going to encounter things you didn't expect through the process. You're going to have to look at your cost when you're finalizing products. You're going to have to look at your margins. You're going to have to look at feasibility. And you're going to have to look to organizational support, right? Is the organization behind it, right? So it's many of those different things. But I think you bring out a very important watch out, which is ensure that you haven't created too large of a gap there and to really mind the gap, which I think is a very clever way of saying it.
Or to at least check before you go. When you find yourself, I think maybe that's the other thing. Like innovation isn't a one-shot deal. Many of our clients that have had the most success in innovation over the years think of innovation as an iterative process. So you may not hit a home run the first time you test something, but you learn something at every single step that allows you to optimize, reframe, rethink, and then retest. Make sure that as things are changing, you don't have to just go, oh, I'm not sure this is the right thing to do anymore. Check. Far less expensive proposition to run another quick test than to make a massive mistake.
Exactly. I think that's true. And I know in my experience, and certainly working with Acupoll as well, is there's never been a better time to do a quick research project. You can turn things around much more quickly than you could 15 years ago. So it's just a matter of ensuring that you have that gut check in place before launching. And I completely agree that better to determine that when it's still inside the four walls of your business before, it's on shelves and not moving, not turning. So fantastic. Well, Ericca, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today on FoodTech Stories. Love hearing about your experiences. I find the way you think about research and how it's applied very intriguing, very clear to understand. So really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise, and be talking to you soon.
Yeah, well, thanks. This was fun.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today on the latest episode of FoodTech Stories. Be sure and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and keep an eye out for our bi-weekly episodes. I'm your host, Megan Thomas, founder of Ladris 17. FoodTech Stories is edited by TJG Media.